chapter 34 is where we're going to be today. Only because I think it's going to take us a minute to kind of work through this. Let me just kind of point out some things that I've learned in the last couple of weeks reading through and studying this. I've mentioned to you before that this is one of the first times where I've studied the Bible and dropped verses and chapters, just reading it as the story in which it was originally written, in the flow of things. So I just want to point out a couple of things. What did we finish last week? It's really boosted confidence here. Just a really great. There you go. Thank you, Mr. Jim, for saving my pride for just a moment. Jacob and Esau, right? So Jacob and Esau restore. Jacob wrestles with God, and you have the kind of the ending of that storyline. And then the next few chapters, there's this pickup of a new storyline. And then after this section, it picks up the storyline which finishes the book of the Genesis, which is who? Joseph, right? Jophus. So in between Isaac and Jacob and Esau, and in between Jacob and Esau's reconciliation and the Joseph narrative, is these chapters couched in between that paints a picture of kind of the underbelly, if you will, of the patriarchal fathers of the nation of Israel. You have these chapters that are, in fact, our chapter today is a hard chapter to read. This is a difficult chapter. So you have this picture here of these events that take place, and then you have the pickup of the story of Joseph. And so I just kind of want to help kind of frame this up a little bit. Chapter 34, this chapter here, is the defilement, or as the Bible says, we'll just use the Bible word, the raping of Dinah, okay? Which Dinah's mother was who? Leah. And Leah had, well, let's kind of back up a little bit into the story. Jacob married who? Rachel and Leah, right? And Jacob loved one more than the other, which was who? Rachel. Just loved Rachel more than Leah. And I think, I'm not trying to read into this too much, but I think that Jacob tolerated Leah and her boys and her family and really, really loved Rachel's boys, right? So Leah has a daughter named who? Dinah, which is chapter 34. Leah has 6 sons, okay? Can we name the 6 sons of Leah? So who's the first one? Reuben, Simeon, Judah, Levi. Is Issachar? Somebody Google it. We'll ask Google. I think Issachar's one and Gad. Is that the 6? Or somebody could go back and look in their Bible. You don't have to Google. Just go back a few chapters and look in your Bible. Okay, anyway, while you're looking it up, when you have the answer, raise your hand. She had these 6 sons, right, that came from Leah, and then Rachel had how many sons? 2, which were, say? Benjamin and Jophus, right? When my kids were little, they called him Jophus, so I'm just calling him Jophus, all right? Joseph had these 2 kids, right? So do we figure out who the 6 sons of Leah were? What are they? Hold on. Start from the beginning. Reuben? Okay.
Judah, Levi, Simeon, Reuben, Issachar, and
Zebulai, not Gad, Zebulai. Okay. So she had these 6 sons. I say that because the next 4 chapters shows stories about whose kids? Leah's kids, right? You have chapter 34, which I think this is incredibly important. You have chapter 34, which is Dinah, and the 2 sons that come to her rescue and plunder the city are who? The two boys were who? It's at the end of this chapter. It's Simeon and Levi. Simeon and Levi were whose mother? Leah, which would make them the blood relative, blood sister of Dinah, okay? So you have those people there. Then you get to chapter 35, and it's the story of Reuben and Bilhah, right? Reuben's mother was Leah. Then you get to chapter 37, which is the beginning of the Joseph saga. And who are the people who pile on Joseph to get him ran off? They're Leah's kids. All right, we'll get to that in later, but so you have this kind of bombardment there. And then in chapter 38, you have another difficult story to read, which is who? Judah and Tamar. And Judah's mother was Leah. Okay, and then chapter 38, well, chapter 37 is the beginning, but then chapter 38 onward is the story of Joseph, whose mother was who? Rachel. So I want us to be Bible students where we don't just read the Bible so we can check it off in the mornings, but I want us to study the Bible. And when you zoom out and you look at the flow of the Bible, take out your verses and chapters and read it like you would read a book, then you begin to see the flow of what's happening here. And really, in chapter 34, 35, 37, 38, you have these stories of Leah's kids and their moral debauchery and anger and hostility and the bad character that exists among them. And then you move to Joseph and you have this guy who the Lord was always with, who followed the Lord, who honored the Lord, who never turned his back on the Lord, who sought the Lord's wisdom and guidance on the rest of the chapter. Now, I wrote down a couple of reasons why I think this is the case. In fact, you don't get to chapter 42 through 44 where there's reconciliation between Joseph, his fathers, and the brothers. So really from chapter 34 all the way to 42, you see this issue of Joseph and his blessings and the brothers and Leah's kids and their bad character. What would be a reason why the writer would do that? Okay, resentment. Okay, well, let me ask you this in a kind of let's broaden out and think of a kind of a big picture reason why. Yeah. God can use anybody. Okay. Okay. No, maybe, but here's what I think. All right, well, because I know we just had Chick-fil-A and, everybody's like, whoa. I read this down. I think what's happening here is the writer's helping us understand that this promise that was given to Abraham, passed to Isaac, given to Jacob, would not be thwarted, would not be ended, would not be severed, would not be undone by the bad actors and characters of Leah's kids and their actions there. That I wrote this down. The promise was not thwarted by the patriarchal fathers of Leah's children. It was just kind of this continuing theme that although these people did this, although Levi and Judah did this, or Simeon and Levi did this, and Reuben did this, and Judah did this, and the brothers did this, there was this continual blessing that God didn't stand up in chapter 36, 37, 38 and say, hold up. You guys are the worst people on the entire planet. You're mean, you're bad, you're horrible. I'm going to end the blessing that I told Abraham, Jacob, and Isaac, and I'm going to pass it off to somebody else. He didn't do that. It continues on through the story, then gets to Joseph and the nation of Israel into the promised land, right? So just trying to paint bigger pictures here, things that just kind of that hit me recently. Chapter 34 is a very difficult chapter to read. There's no prayers. There's no divine relations. There's no promissory blessings. There's no explicit mention of God. Nothing of that in chapter 34. It's just the story of Dinah and the Hittites and her brothers taking retribution out on those people. So let's just kind of dive in there. Let's just divide chapter 34 into three sections. You have the tension, which is verses 1 through 4. You have the reaction of the parties, which is 5 through 29. And then you have the vicious outcome, which is 25 through 31. So the tension, 1 through 4, the reaction of the parties, 5 through 29, or 24, and then the vicious outcome, chapter 25 through 31. And really the chapter progresses from bad to worse. It's just from bad to worse in the activities that takes place. Okay, chapter 34, verse 1. Leah's daughter Dinah, whom Leah bore to Jacob, went out and just kind of circle Hebrew. When you study Hebrew, we don't get this in our English language, but the Hebrew language, there's a lot of rhyming between words and usage. And when there's rhyming in the Old Testament, in the Hebrew, there's this relationship that's built there grammatically. We don't get that in our English. She went out to see, so I would circle to see some of the young women in the area. So Dinah wakes up one day and she's like, I want to go out and I want to see the young women in the area. Verse 2. When Shechem, son of Hamor, the Hivitite, who was the region's chieftain, saw her. She goes out to see. Now she's seen. He took her and he raped her. Now, I just think it's important to point this out. Not all of y'all's translation says rape. I know that. There isn't a Hebrew word for rape, so that word doesn't exist. The word means to take by force. And so there is an argument that people will make, and I'll kind of show you why they argue that this really wasn't, the issue wasn't that she was raped. The issue was that this guy didn't go through the proper channels. I think she was raped. I'm just telling you what the argument of some people out there will hold to. He took her and he raped her. He became infatuated with Jacob's daughter Dinah. He loved the young girl and spoke tenderly to her. Get me this girl as a wife, he told his father. He became obsessed with her. So Jacob heard that Shechem had defiled his daughter's Dinah. So circle that word, Jacob heard that Shechem had defiled his daughter Dinah. But since his sons were with his livestock in the field, he remained silent until they returned. So Jacob hears about it and he remains silent. And part of the argument why people kind of would move away that it wasn't rape is that her father's initial response is, I'm just going to be quiet about this. I mean, let's be honest, if we had heard that about one of our daughters, we wouldn't just remain silent. You know, we'd end up in jail. I mean, we would just lose our mind, right? He just remains silent. Meanwhile, Shechem's father Hamor came to speak with Jacob. So Jacob's sons returns from the field, and when they heard about it, the incident, they were deeply grieved and very angry. So you see the difference. He hears about it, he's silent. The boys hear about it, they're deeply grieved and angry. For Shechem had committed an outrage against Israel for raping Jacob's daughter, and such a thing could not be done. And you can imagine the hostility of this meeting here. Jacob and Shechem are meeting. The brothers walk in. What are y'all meeting about? Well, this is what happened. The brothers lose their mind. This should not happen. This should not be done. So then Hamor said to Jacob's son, my son Shechem has his heart set on your daughter. Please give her to him as a wife. Intermarry with us, give your daughters to us, and take our daughters for yourselves. Live with us. The land is before you. Settle here, move about, and acquire property in it. Okay, let's stop. What group is Shechem from? The who? Yeah, the Hivites, right? Okay. What is the history between this family and the Hivites, the Hittites, the Hivites? There are two significant events that take place in the book of Genesis up to this point in the relationship between Jacob's family and this group. Do you remember which ones they were? When Abraham went and purchased land in chapter 23 for his family to be buried on, who did he go to? These people, this group, chapter 23. In chapter 38, verses 18 and 19, Jacob does the same thing, which is eventually where Joseph was buried. So there is this established relationship here, which when you read this, it makes sense for them to say, hey, there's a trust here. We've done this with Abraham. We've given this land for your ancestors. We've given this for Jacob. Like there's this relationship trust here that we should find some kind of agreement. Let our daughters intermarry. This land's your land. This land is my land. I think that's a song. Then verse 11, then Shechem said to Dinah's father and brothers, grant me this favor and I'll give you whatever you say. Demand of me a high compensation and gift, and I'll give you whatever you ask of me. Just give the girl to be my wife." But Jacob's sons answered Shechem and his father Hamor deceitfully, because he had defiled their sister. "We cannot do this thing," they said to them. "Giving our sister to an uncircumcised man is a disgrace to us. We will agree with you only on this condition: if all your males are circumcised as we are." Which, just to point out there, these sons are making a mockery of the act of circumcision. They're mocking it. "Then we will give your daughters, take your daughters for yourselves, live with you, and become one people. But if you will not listen to us and be circumcised, then we'll take our daughter and we'll go." Their words seemed good to Hamor and his son Shechem. The young man did not delay doing this because he was delighted with Jacob's daughter. Now he was the most important in all his father's family. So Hamor and his son Shechem went to the gate of their city and spoke to the men of their city. "These men are peaceful towards us," they said. "Let them live in our land and move about in it, for indeed the region is large enough for them. Let's take their daughters as our wives and give our daughters to them. But the men will agree to live with us and be one people only on this condition: if all of our men are circumcised as they are. Won't their livestock, their possessions, and all their animals become ours? Only let's agree with them, and they will live with us." We're going to be having all these things. All the men who had come to the city gates listened to Hamor and his son Shechem, and all those men were circumcised. On the third day, when they were still in pain, two of Jacob's sons, Benjamin and Levi, Dinah's brothers, took their swords, went into the unsuspecting city, and killed every male. They killed Hamor and his son Shechem with their swords. They took Dinah from Shechem's house, and they went away. So these guys had tricked everybody. Hey, if you'll do this, then we'll be fine. So they do it. 3 days later, it's in pain. These guys come in with swords, and they take everybody out. And Simeon and Levi level them all, take the things, and they left. Then Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, "You have brought trouble on me, making me odious to the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites and the Perizzites. We are few in number. If they unite against me and attack me, I and my household will be destroyed." So, two events take place. One, Dinah is raped by Simeon and Levi, and Jacob remains silent, and then eventually the brothers find out. The second thing, the brothers go and destroy the city and kill everybody, and Jacob's response is what? "Well, woe is me. What are you doing? This is going to cause more harm for us." Jacob's concern seems to be greater for who than for who? Himself more than Dinah, right? Like, what have you done? Now this is going to cause heartache and pain and trouble. You guys should have just done this. It should have been okay. And which is kind of funny because these sons deceived people, and Jacob's mad because they deceived these people, and then and so you have all of these things here. So before I finish up here, process this with me for just a minute. This story, right? You read through it and check it off your list, but kind of process this in your own heart and thinking about this and what's taking place here. What are some things that come to your mind?
Seems like there was a lot of animosity between everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. Why would Jacob remain silent about Dinah but lose his mind on his sons?
He was trying to keep the peace.
Say again?
He was
Trying to keep the peace? Okay. Ma'am? Women weren't worth anything then? Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. It's no big deal. Okay. 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 I was reading through this and I was struck how the chapter ended with what the brothers say. And because I think words have weight, what you say versus what you don't say makes a difference. And they ended the chapter by saying this, but they answered, should he treat, and how is Dinah termed? Our sister like a prostitute, instead of saying, should he treat your daughter like a prostitute? Should she treat our sister? You think, well, we're just splitting hairs here. I don't think so. I think if you'll pay attention to the story and the words that's being used here, you'll begin to see the treatment of family members and Jacob towards Leah's kids versus Jacob towards Rachel's kids. When the brothers say to him, should he treat our sister like this instead of should they treat your daughter like this? I think there's a severing line there, and you kind of begin to see this flesh out through the rest of the chapter of Genesis, where Jacob becomes broken over Joshua being sent off and responds in such a way that the brothers are kind of blown away by it. When Benjamin and the story that happens with Benjamin towards the end, and we can't do this, and he can't. I think there's this deep. Yes, Jacob loved Rachel more than he loved Leah, and I may be off, and I don't think that if I hold to this view that I'm not going to go to heaven. But I do think that there's something to think about here, that how Jacob viewed his family, Rachel and her kids, and Leah and her kids. She's just a piece of property. This is no big deal. Just let her go marry him. Why are you guys doing this? Would he have responded the same if it had been Rachel had a daughter and Rachel daughter would? I don't think so, but I don't know.